The topic for today is eliminating team distortion. I would like to share with you a journey of probably one of the most holy grail pursuits in corporates, which is how do you get a team to be effective, productive, and at the same time innovative in the solutions. So this journey is what this presentation is about and the insights from that journey. Sorry, I was having a little bit of lag time in the slides. So this journey really began about 3 years ago with an extensive book research. The book was called The Superstar Code, and the hypothesis behind the book was that every one of us has a uniquely individual success formula in what are my preferences and how I like to deal with situations in life, etc., and deal with people as well. So with this hypothesis that if everyone is individually unique, how can any person really emulate the other person and hope to succeed? So the idea was that know your own formula and then apply it in the situations or the goals that you find important in your life. This research was supported by Emergenetics. I think everyone knows that tool by now, which basically gives you an insight into what individuals' preferences as far as thinking and behavior are concerned. So the whole research was essentially done by using the Emergenetics profile, followed by an in-depth interview with people across the world, across races, cultures, professions. The idea being that to find out and drill down to the individual. And it was very heartening to see after 100+ participants that every one of them had truly individual, truly unique profiles and truly unique codes. In fact, the reason we called the book the Superstar Code was we felt that everyone had their own superstar code. So after this research came up with this essential finding, we said, hang on, while maybe the book could be ready and could be published, we delayed that because we felt that maybe we need to test out this hypothesis in more relevant areas like, for example, individuals' lives as well as teams. So in fact, the research transformed into a workshop format, and that workshop format went into a lot of organizations across, again, Middle East, Africa, India, different kinds of organizations, advertising, media, companies like Accenture, etc. So the insights that came from A, the book research, and B, the workshops, which touched about 150 people across about 20 odd workshops, is really what is fed into the short presentation that I would like to share with you and the insights from there. So let's ask ourselves this very basic question. What causes team distortion? What comes in the way from the team truly living up to its true potential? So let's look at it from various angles. While of course from the research and the workshops we got a lot of perspectives on this, let me share with you some commonly held points of views from people you may have heard of. So I'm sure a lot of you may have heard of Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. In this study and this book, what Patrick basically talks about is that if you look at this pyramid, these are the fundamental barriers that come in the way of a team functioning effectively. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you see there's absence of trust, which is probably the most hygiene, fear of conflict, and obviously what he means is constructive conflict. Then there's lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and ultimately inattention to results. So these are things that come in the way of a team being truly a successful team. Let's look at another model. If you've heard of Keith Yamashita, who wrote the book Unstuck, talking about organization congruence. What does this mean? So if you look at this diagram, essentially you see a circle, and right in the center, you see the black circle which says purpose. What this basically means is that if the organization is driven by a central common purpose and the other circles are aligned and are supporting that purpose, then everything is in harmony and in fact leading to better creative output. So for example, if the purpose is clear, the strategy is essentially that plan which makes that purpose come alive. The structure of people and the processes would support that purpose. The metrics and rewards would help people know whether the purpose is on track. The kind of people that you would obviously attract and train and nurture and groom would again help that purpose come alive. And obviously the culture is what would kind of help support that purpose or not. So if anything is out of whack, it basically tells you that this team is not really a team. So if you look at the common missing hygiene factors from either Patrick Lencioni or the organization congruence model from Keith Yamashita, you find that one of the key missing elements is lack of common purpose and lack of trust or empathy. And this is something which pretty much resonated with all the superstar code workshops that we did. So if lack of purpose and trust or empathy are missing, as you can see, no common purpose right at the top and low empathy, pretty much hygiene, the team can't really be a team. So how can it be productive? Forget about creative. So to address these distortions, the superstar code workshop was designed and is in action. So what is the superstar code? So essentially, if you look at it from a team perspective, it's a systems refresh look at the current team ground up. What does systems refresh mean? Essentially, it means seeing the same thing in a new way. Now, of course, if you have the luxury and you say things are not going the way you would want them to go in an organization, you say, hey, okay, let's change the team. But that's probably a luxury not everyone can afford. Okay, so let's look at the current team, and maybe by looking at that same team in a totally different way, you might actually unlock new insights in helping that team perform in the way it's probably supposed to. So talking about looking at things in a new way, this is a visual which I'm quite confident a lot of people have already seen. So if you look at it from one angle, some people might see a very old lady, 65 plus, wrinkled, and maybe someone else might see a very young lady in her 20s. And some people see both. The point is that the people who see the young may not see the old and vice versa. So it's really about how you look at that picture, maybe open your mind, look at it in different ways, and actually start seeing both the ladies. Another example, which animal do you see? Okay, yeah, I've heard a frog from people, I've heard snakes, I've heard some other bizarre animals also being thrown up. But if you really tilt the picture, hey, it's a horse. Yeah, so it's a question of looking at the same data in a different way. My favorite, a lot of people might say that these are examples from Neil deGrasse Tyson from the Cosmos TV show, the different planets that we want to explore, or it could be the reality, which are actually picture of frying pans. So the bottom line is, when you change the way you see things, the things you see actually change in front of you. So I'm going to share with you a quick video, which to my mind really demonstrates this in the best possible way.
An event seen from one point of view gives one impression. Seen from another point of view, it gives quite a different impression. But it's only when you get the whole picture you can fully understand what's going on.
I actually use this video in all my examples because I think in a short 30 seconds, this Guardian film, which is 30 years old by the way, I think very powerfully demonstrates that if you look at the film, right in the beginning, you see maybe this very questionable looking young man running from this car, and you have a passerby looking at that same person very suspiciously. Obviously, this guy is up to no good, and then the passerby passes, and then, oh my God, he is looking at this man with a suitcase, and it looks like he's about to accost and rob him. And that's like a horrific kind of realization, isn't it? And then when you actually pull back and you look at the entire picture, what's really happening is transformative, is that there is a building construction happening and something is about to fall right on that old man. And this young man is actually running to save him from imminent disaster. Now, just think about this. In 30 seconds, your perception has probably changed from, oh, look at this guy from, he looks like he's up to no good, to, wow, what a guy, he's my hero. So that's what happens when you look at data in different ways, okay? You get different perspective, different angles, different ways of actually judging that same element. So you might think that change is about a long journey and all of that, but sometimes just a shift of perspective can create a fantastic change within that same team. And because of that perspective, you can start realizing a lot of blind spots which you were just not seeing before. And that is the exact principle that we used and we use in the Superstar Code workshops. And that's and the insights that come out from there is the quick journey that I would like to share with you. So if you look at what's coming in the way of this team being the most creative and productive, etc., the first part was what was our common purpose. And I would like to make a point over here. It is not about a common purpose being, hey, look, let's increase our business by X%, financial metrics. Those are obvious, those are hygiene. But I'm talking about a common emotional purpose, something which actually aligns people in a way that excites, inspires, no matter what your function, no matter what your department. And I found that when there is a lack of this, people just focus on their specific departments and their silos, and then it kind of becomes very transactional. When it is a common emotional purpose which aligns people, differences start melting and suddenly you have something to do together and achieve together. So this was the first platform of the Superstar Code journey. The second part of the journey is, if that's the purpose, what are the real challenges that we're all facing? So even articulating that, okay, look, as a team, this is what we're facing, also gives a new way of the team to understand current reality. And this is a great journey in the team being aligned. The third part is, if that's the exciting purpose that we all have in common, what are the individual contributions that each one can make? Each one obviously comes from their own functional capabilities as well as their own focus and strength areas. So if that was the purpose, this is what each one brings to the table. Again, this brings not only commitment but alignment to that purpose in a very specific way. Then if you look at the challenges faced by the individuals, so you might have somebody from an X department, but that's the challenge that he faces. Suddenly people start thinking, okay, hang on, he wants to do this. These are genuine challenges that he has or she has, okay? And now I know. So it's again transparency coming in the process, and suddenly I don't just judge this person and kind of write that person off because he may not be doing it the way I would have done it. So this is again something which creates empathy. The other part, and this is where the interesting part starts happening, is knowing what makes each individual tick. And this is where you actually use tools like Emergenetics to truly know the person. What are his or her natural preferences in terms of thinking or behavior? We also get into understanding each person's aptitudes in life and not only at work, skills, passions. This is truly knowing the person in a way probably you never had before. Once you know what makes each person tick, then an interesting part of knowing that person is also questioning stereotypes. Because if you remember the blind spots that can easily come in the way, a lot of those blind spots can come in the way of a team functioning truly in an aligned manner. So taking some examples from the book research and using the Emergenetics construct, I would just like to give you, while most people may have a little understanding of the Emergenetics tool and the model, but this is just to give an insight to people who may not. Emergenetics obviously gives you thinking preferences and your behavioral preferences. The example I'm going to cite right now is coming from just the thinking preferences part. Okay, so Emergenetics basically has a construct which tells you, like it's a metaphor of the brain, which is that everybody has analytical thinking capabilities, conceptual, social, structural, but each person has individual preferences of which one he prefers to use naturally. Okay, so analytical versus conceptual versus structural versus social. Okay, so if you look at this, I'll give you an example which I normally share in the workshops. Now, if I look at this this person, this is a model, actress, etc., called Gulpanag, okay, from India. And if you look at her, she's one of the attractive, uh, very outdoorsy, that kind of a person. So you look at her, she's kind of racing cars, she's running marathons, and at the same time, she's seen very, as very attractive. Now, when I ask people, okay, so what kind of thinking preferences do you think she would have within all those four? And normally I hear, oh yeah, yeah, she must be a very social thinking preference kind of person. She must be very conceptual because she seems to be doing very new and innovative things. But hang on, that's not what her emergenetics profile tells you. In fact, she has an analytical preference followed by a practical preference. So then you say, oh, hang on, is she doing something which she's not supposed to do? No. When I interviewed her, I realized that everything she does in life, it may be adventure, but she does it with clear prioritization and a very clear plan and process to do the same. So it doesn't mean that to do adventure, you have to be having a conceptual preference or a social preference. Similarly, here's another example. There is a good friend who also went to the workshop, Sasi Kiran Gade, who's a robotics engineer. And he does programming of robots for various applications, be it marketing, education, etc. Now you'll say, okay, hang on, this is a very intense field. As an engineer, you would need to have an analytical preference, a structural preference. But again, hang on, he doesn't have either. He in fact has conceptual and he has a social preference. So then what's going on out here? Does that mean that he could be a bad robotics engineer? Or he shouldn't have been a robotics engineer in the first place? No. In fact, the insight into Sasi is that he looks at robotics as a way of helping people. So he loves it when he can actually make a difference in people's lives using technology stroke robotics. So he works with children, education, etc. So the idea really over here is, it's not about can this person, he or she, do that work at all. If she doesn't have that preference, he doesn't have that preference. But if he were to do that work, this is how that person would do that work. And this basic understanding in the team, saying that, okay, this person looks at life that way, so therefore he would look at work that way, and that's a very key understanding and empathy building exercise. So once we know what makes people tick, how does that person fit into the team and the roles that the person would kind of address in that team? And this is where we actually added another tool to add those perspectives and also eliminate as many blind spots as possible. And that tool, if people have heard about, it's a very famous tool called BELBIN. So like Emergenetics gives you individual preferences as far as thinking and behavior are concerned, BELBIN gives you specific team role preferences. So we brought those two to work together. And besides how the individual clicks in the team, it's also important for people to know what does it take for that same individual to stick to the journey and complete his goals. For some people, it could be creative visualization which helps that person reach the goal. For another person, it could be just creating a plan and just following it. So it doesn't mean that one method is the only way to make that happen. So again, that knowledge of how individuals would actually be successful for the rest of the team members to know can make a big difference. So what is BELBIN? So Dr. BELBIN, okay, who founded this entire methodology, basically says that a team is not a bunch of people with job titles, but a congregation of individuals, each of whom has a role which is understood by other members. Members of a team seek out certain roles and they perform most effectively in the ones that are most natural to them. So just like Emergenetics is talking about their natural thinking and behavioral preferences, BELBIN talks about the natural team role preferences. A very key point from BELBIN, and this resonated with me the most, which is that a lot of times we feel that in a team, we should have more people like us. We should be more comfortable with these people, right? So yes, there is a truth that we are more comfortable with people with whom we are compatible, but hang on. We might be more effective with people with whom we are incompatible. And that's where the discomfort starts. But how do I manage those differences? So the point is that maybe differences can actually make a difference, but differences can be also destructive. So the idea is not about avoiding differences, but of realizing the differences, realizing that those differences can actually result in more creativity, and then aligning them in a way that works for the individuals and for the better creative output for the team. If you look at the two tools, Emergenetics as well as BELBIN, we found a lot of correlation. So BELBIN looks at team roles which are social in nature, thinking in nature, and action oriented. Again, corroborating with the Emergenetics approach, which has thinking preferences as well as behavioral preferences. So we saw that connection happening very well, and people started connecting the dots in the workshops. So what are the kind of team role insights that you would get from BELBIN? A, what are the kind of natural roles that I would like to play? More importantly, what are the natural roles I would not like to play? And when people know that, at least you can start optimizing by allocating the right roles to the right people. There is a 360-degree feedback element that BELBIN has. So it also tells the team, look, you feel you're doing this, but this is what people are actually perceiving. So it gives you a beautiful reality kind of check. And because we correlate the BELBIN and Emergenetics, it actually tells you, so for example, maybe there's a person who has a certain kind of preference, maybe it's conceptual, but in the team role that he plays, he's not actually doing any kind of conceptual role. So that could give you a warning signal saying that, hey, maybe this person should be groomed into some kind of thinking role, and vice versa. So it's a beautiful check, which basically we started realizing was happening with the two of these tools being used together. Second thing is, finally, when I have all of these insights, how do I optimize them? So the idea that use the individual preferences or passions, align them to team priorities, and then finally optimizing it by slotting these people in the best possible way, keeping in mind the team objective and the opportunity for healthy conflict and creativity. So finally, okay, from an effective and creative team, the questions I'd like to leave behind with you is, A, do we have a common purpose, which we're all emotionally excited or inspired about? Do we know what exact individual contributions would make that purpose an achievable reality in the team? Are these individual contributions matched to the individual passions and preferences where these people come from, and it's not as force fit? Does everyone in the team know each other's preferences or passions or capabilities and challenges? Do we know if our team comprises true diversity and are not just members who are just trying to emulate each other? Do we know which member should play what role given each other's preferences and team's overall priority at what time? When you assemble all these elements, that's where we found that it ultimately eliminates team distortion in the best possible way. So in fact, this approach, like I mentioned earlier, has been implemented in various kinds of companies. In fact, some companies still today, it's been 1.5 years since they did the first Superstar Team Code workshop. They do not give any allocation of team roles till they actually look at all the optimize that came out of this Superstar Team Code workshop. Accenture India, in fact, went to this workshop, one of their teams, and they tracked right from the workshop to behaviors that they found very important that came out of the workshop, and they tracked that for the next 3 to 6 months, and they found that it made a huge difference in the team cohesiveness. So this is really ultimately where we want to end, where everything is in alignment and we get the common purpose as well as that empathy, which makes that team not just a team, but a very productive and a very creative team. And that's really the journey from the Superstar Code workshop. I hope this attempt of trying to crunch a 9-hour workshop into 20 minutes has served as some kind of insight and inspiration for you. Thank you so much for your time, and I think we're now open for Q&A. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Abhijit. And of course, that was Abhijit, and he was presenting live all the way from Mumbai in India. And Abhijit was sharing about how he used Emergenetics as a way to help individuals identify their thinking and behavioral preferences, and then using it within the team to remove any team distortion. And of course, we'd now like to open the space for any questions that you may have for Abhijit. And if you do, please pose your questions on the dialog box at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Now, to kick the Q&A session going, I would like to maybe first pose Abhijit a question. Now, in your more than 16 years of experience, working in the media, working in advertising, and then now moving into being an executive coach for senior management of companies big and small, what would you say would be, your observations of leaders in general in terms of how they manage the teams, especially where the teams tend to be more of a diverse mix of people? Abhijit?
Okay, so just to get the question right, I'm understanding that what would be the key challenges faced by leaders in managing diverse teams? Is that correct?
That's correct. That's right. Do you see a specific kind of a trend, or the kind of challenges that some of your clients may have come to you because they're leaders and they're managing diverse teams. They're coming from different cultures, coming from different backgrounds. What were some of the more common challenges that leaders are facing today in terms of managing diverse teams in your observation?
Okay, so I think across the board, what I must admit is that most good leaders have good intent, but they come from their own understanding and their own filters. So somewhere down the line, they start realizing that maybe they need to look at either their team or the way they're looking at the goals that they have set in a totally different way. So I find that one of the common things is this gap between what I believe is the reality and what I uh, may not be seeing as the possible way forward. So it's that gap which I see. And once that gap gets bridged, I feel that that diversity, whether in terms of culture or in terms of talent, etc., starts getting bridged very easily.
Very nice. Now, obviously, you did this massive experiment on or survey trying to identify the superstar code using the Emergenetics profile, trying to pick up ingredients of success for individuals and teams. And you have highlighted key ingredients like having a purpose or having trust and empathy. What would you say would be, if people are really wanting to adopt some of the same similar approach that you have talked about within their own team, would there be some kind of best practices that you could share, or maybe some tips on how they could now, after the webinar, do something positive within their team? What would you say, would be quick and easy wins for some of these leaders in implementing the strategies that you have used for the superstar code?
Sure. So I think the key three takeout points, which I would really encourage a lot of people to go back with, is one, no matter what your specific goals are, etc., spend the time and energy to figure out what is the common emotional goal that truly binds your team. And I have found that once the team realizes this, it suddenly energizes the team at a totally different level. So understanding the what and the why paves the way for the how. So one is A, know your most exciting common emotional goal. Second is this whole thing of allowing a platform of true understanding of each other. That's second. Third, using those insights of understanding each other to truly optimize the team basis that rather than an organization force fit. So a lot of times, for example, I've had situations where, in fact, the first Superstar Team Code workshop, the CEO realized that, oh, because I trusted you so much, I kept giving you this work. But now I realize that you don't really enjoy it. And maybe that was a disservice to you, to me, and the organization. It's not that you can't do it, it's just that you were doing it because I asked you to do it. So these three things can make a huge difference, and that would be my basic leave behind.